Now, have you ever thought of using active speakers instead of passive ones? Have you ever thought of using speakers that, all you have to do is just add a source and you're good to go? Let's talk about that. Now, in the realm of speakers, there are mainly two kinds of speakers as it relates to power, right? Or the lack thereof. There are active speakers and there are passive speakers, right? Active speakers and passive speakers. And you may be asking yourself, what's the difference? How can I tell if a speaker is active or it's passive? Right. So the main differences is that an active speaker will already have an amplifier, or they have the amplifiers built into the speaker cabinet, right? The amplifiers that drive the speaker drivers are already built into the cabinet of the speaker, right? So with an active speaker, you will have the amplifier inside, and you will also have the crossover network that is, built into the cabinet. And obviously, because the speaker already has an amplifier built into the cabinet, there is no need for an external power source, right? You don't have to go out and buy another amplifier because you already have your amplifier built in your speakers right there, right? Some of those speakers, or some of those systems that are built into an active amplifier may also have a DAC built in, right? For example, if the speaker has digital connections like an optical input or an HDMI input on it, it may have a DAC. Now, what is a DAC? DAC, which is an acronym, it's an acronym DAC, for digital to analog converter, right? So what a DAC does, it converts digital signals to an analog form that your speakers can understand and play back. Because inherently, the way speakers are designed, they cannot play back a digital signal, right? And when I say a digital signal, I'm talking about the waveform of the signal, right? If you look at an analog signal, it's more of a what is called a sine wave kind of signal. But that's an analog signal, right? But a digital signal is more like it has squares, squares, yeah. Instead of a gradual sine wave, a digital signal comes in, sharp square waves. You understand? So speakers can't play back that kind of signal. All right? The signal has to be converted to an analog form, electrically speaking, so that the speakers can play it. Okay? So that's the purpose of a DAC. All right, and I have beside me here an active speaker. Now this speaker is really a studio monitor. It belongs to my son because he's in music, and this is one of the Yamaha brands. But the difference between this and a passive speaker is the fact that this has an amplifier built right into it. So if you look closer here, I mean, obviously you can't see the amplifier, but this is where the power cable is connected right here. So you would plug this into your power main. This is the power switch right here. And these two inputs up here are for your audio input. So you have a 1/4 inch here, and you have an XLR connector here. All right. Okay. So, and of course you have a gain control here, right? Okay, to adjust your input gain, or to turn up the turn the volume up. That's an example of an active speaker. So on the opposing end, on the opposite end, I should say, you have passive speakers, right? So this is an example of a passive speaker. Now this speaker does not have an amplifier built inside of it. All right. What you have here are two connectors here, and all that is inside the box is just the crossover and the speaker drivers. All right. And basically what the crossover does inside of most speakers is just to separate the bass. If it's a two-way speaker system, just to separate the bass from the treble, because you do not want bass going into your tweeter, and you do not want treble going into your bass speaker. I mean, if treble, from a more technical point of view, if treble goes into your bass speaker, that is not a really big deal per se. But if you have bass going into your tweeter, that can be a problem. That can damage your tweeter. All right, so this is the tweeter up here, and this is your bass speaker, right? So what the crossover does, it separates it breaks up the signal coming in. It breaks up the signal coming in from your amplifier, and it separates the treble. It sends the treble to your tweeter here, and it sends the bass to the bass speaker. So this is a basic, I should say, passive speakers are the more common speakers that you will find on the market. These are the kind of speakers that you go to your big box stores and or your neighborhood audio video store, and you would purchase readily. They are the more common speakers on the market, right? And so the major difference between this and an active speaker, apart from what I mentioned earlier, is the fact that, okay, there are no amplifiers built in. All right. All that is inside the box is just a crossover and the drivers. But in addition to that, you will need an amplifier to drive this speaker, right? Because this is passive, right? You will need an amplifier to drive it. So you need some kind of external power to drive it. One thing to note also is that because these are less complicated speakers, passive speakers, that is, they're less complicated in terms of the construction and what is inside, the technology and all of that, they are less expensive. Obviously they would be, because there's not much hardware going on inside of them, so they are less expensive. They are also more easily available. They're more readily available. You will find a lot of passive speakers being sold on the used market, right? Not so much when it comes to active speakers, because when people, when individuals buy an active speaker, it is something that they can grow into. You can grow into it because, number one, like I said, it already has an amplifier built in. So all you will need to do to change, for the most part, might be your source equipment. For example, your streamer or whatever musical source you're using, or your turntable or whatever. right? Yeah, so those are the main differences. For the active speaker, amplifier built in, maybe a DAC built in, and so they're more expensive. The passive speaker, no amplifier built in, so because of that they're less expensive, less parts inside, and they are more readily available on the market. All right, so what are you rocking? What's your take when it comes to active and passive speakers? Are you using an active speaker in your system? Meaning, the question is, if you're using an active speaker in your system, what were the main reasons why you decided to go that route? That's the question I want to ask you. Is it because you just want to, you don't want to think about buying, other pieces of amplifier gear anymore? Or maybe you're just trying to simplify your setup. All you need is your turntable and maybe your streamer. Could that be the reason? Or are you doing passive speakers because you like to have your separates? You like to have your, your CD player. Not that you don't need a CD player for an active speaker, but I mean, you like to have your separates. So you want to have your amplifier. You like to switch out your amplifier from time to time. Because from time to time there are new amplifiers that will, come onto the market, and you may want to try something different. So what's the main reason why you would, switch, you would decide on using an active amplifier as opposed to a passive one, or vice versa? What's your main reason? Since I have been into this audio video space, I've only owned a pair of active speaker once. And to be honest, I purchased them for myself, then I gave them to my son because he was getting into music and he could not afford a pair of studio monitors at the time. And so I gave him those active speakers. They were a pair of Klipsch bookshelf speakers, and so he used them for a time, and then he gave them back to me. After which I sold them, but they were fairly decent. They had digital connections built in. There were no phono inputs, but there was also Bluetooth built in. And of course, the regular RCA connectors built in. So they were, having an active speaker can be quite convenient, especially when, they all have, especially when they have all the connections that you need. If you can find one with maybe a phono input, with a digital input like an optical input, one that has Bluetooth and all of that, then it might solve some of your amplifier needs. All you will need probably is your musical source, like I said, which could probably be your turntable and your a turntable and maybe a streamer, and a CD player if you're still spinning CDs, so those are the major difference between an active and a passive speaker system, and I think it all comes down to preference in terms of which one you prefer or which one you find more convenient for you. Me personally, I'm still doing passive speakers because I have my own amplifiers, and for me, I like to change amplifiers from time to time. But for someone else who may be in a small space, where space is at a premium, and you would just wanna have a small footprint, so to speak. Having active speakers might solve a little bit of the issue in terms of amplification and in terms of space, where all you would need is just your musical source in the form of a preamplifier, or maybe just a streamer and your turntable. So those that's something I just thought I would just touch base on today, in terms of what are the differences, and what are you actually using for your stereo setup. An active speaker system could be suitable for a little 2-channel for TV watching. If you don't want to use a sound bar, and you can find an active pair with analog in or digital in, optical in, that might be able to get you going until you can do maybe a 5.1 surround sound setup. So it could be a nice interim kind of thing to get you going, like I said, for movie watching and all of that, and your music playback. Yeah, so let me hear about it. I love to hear about it. What's your take on active speakers as opposed to passive ones? And what are you using for your listening pleasure right now, whether it's for movies or music? Let me hear about it, all right? And if you love this video, we just talk about these little, stuff here and there as it relates to audio and video setups. Give me a thumbs up. And if you love the channel, don't forget to subscribe, all right? So until the next video, guys, you take care of yourself. And I'm going to make a video. About how to implement a studio monitor, how to use studio monitors for 2-channel listening without using a computer, right? Because for the most part, studio monitors are connected to computers, especially nowadays with technology. They would be connected to a computer somewhere, somehow. So I want to make a video about how to use a pair of studio monitors for 2-channel audio without using a computer. All right? So until the next video, you take care of yourself and be good. Thank you so much for watching.